There is a ledger sitting in a library in Beverly Hills right now, and it is one of the most consulted documents in all of film scholarship. Economists use it, historians use it. Anyone who wants the true financial picture of Hollywood's golden age eventually finds their way to it because it records in meticulous detail the cost and revenue of every MGM film from 1924 to 1962. Every production, every dollar, every loss. The man who kept that ledger spent the rest of his working hours making sure nothing else got written down. His name was Eddie Mannix, and the fact that his paperwork survives as a gift to historians while his actual work vanished without a trace is the most perfectly constructed irony in Hollywood history. Mannix did not arrive in Hollywood as a fixer. He arrived as a SPI. Nicholas Schenck, co-owner of Palisades Amusement Park in New Jersey and second-in-command at Loews Incorporated, sent Mannix west in 1924 when Loews formed Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. The official title was comptroller, and the actual job was to keep an eye on Louis B. Mayer and make sure the New York money was being respected. Before any of that, Mannix had worked as a bouncer at the amusement park, moving into management from there, which meant he was not a film person in any conventional sense. He was an enforcer in a suit, and that distinction mattered enormously. What happened next was not what Schenck had planned. Within a year, Mannix stopped reporting back to New York and embedded himself with Mayer instead, rising fast enough that by the late 1920s, his official title read General Manager of MGM. His unofficial title was the one that stuck with everybody, the Fixer. Working alongside Howard Strickling, MGM's head of publicity, Mannix ran what amounted to a private crisis management operation inside the most powerful studio in the world. The lot itself was essentially self-contained, with its own doctors, its own security force trained to recognize every contract player on site, and its own internal police, whose entire purpose was to reach any incident well before the LAPD showed up. When something went wrong, Mannix and Strickling were the system, and the system performed consistently. Understanding how it worked requires understanding what the studios were actually protecting. MGM in the 1930s and the 1940s was not simply a film company, but a vertically integrated entertainment machine with tens of millions of dollars tied up in specific human faces. Clark Gable was not a person to the studio's balance sheet. He was an asset, and so was Jean Harlow, and so was every other name above the title. Whatever those assets did in their private hours registered as a liability, and Mannix's job was to manage the liability before it could affect the asset. He turned out to be very good at it. Keeping score here is genuinely difficult because the entire point of what Mannix did was that no score would exist. Consider the Paul Bern case in 1932. Bern was a senior MGM executive and the new husband of Jean Harlow, then one of the biggest stars in the world, and in September of that year, he turned up dead at the couple's home. Authorities ruled the death self-inflicted, but the studio's own personnel had reached the scene before law enforcement, with Mannix among the first people called. The official account carried gaps from the beginning, and those gaps never fully closed. What actually happened that night depends entirely on who you believe, and the people with the most direct knowledge spent decades saying as little as possible. The Patricia Douglas case in 1937 is more thoroughly documented and more disturbing for exactly that reason. Douglas was one of roughly 120 young women hired to attend an MGM sales convention in May of that year, and an incident occurred that night that she subsequently attempted to address through legal action. According to later accounts by journalist David Sten, who spent years investigating the case, Mannix's response was to set private detectives on Douglas in search of anything usable against her. When they found nothing, other women who had been present at the event were encouraged to provide statements that contradicted Douglas's account. The case collapsed. Douglas spent decades in effective silence before Sten located her in 2003, still alive and still furious about what had been done to her. Sten turned the investigation into a 2007 documentary called Girl 27, and it is worth your time. The Joan Crawford situation produced a number that nobody can agree on. Early in Crawford's career, before she became a major star, footage existed that MGM urgently wanted destroyed, and Mannix went after every copy. One account has him paying $100,000 for the master. Another account, stated with equal confidence, puts the figure at $25,000, negotiated down with assistance from associates who operated well outside any studio organizational chart. Both figures remain unverified in any documented record, which should surprise nobody. The one consistent detail across every version of the story is that Mannix made it happen and the footage disappeared. The Loretta Young situation in 1935 is the one that eventually broke cover, just not until long after it could damage anyone who mattered to the studio. Young became pregnant during the filming of The Call of the Wild, and the father was Clark Gable, her co-star on the production. Mannix orchestrated what Young's daughter later described as a meticulously choreographed arrangement. Young vanished from public view, the pregnancy stayed concealed, and the child was later presented as adopted. Young told her daughter the truth in 1966, but the general public did not learn of it until 2000, when Young's posthumous memoir addressed the whole thing directly. That is 25 years of silence after The Internal Truth came out, for a cover-up that started in 1935. Not bad. If there is a point where Mannix's story stops being a study in institutional power and becomes something stranger and considerably sadder, it is the George Reeves case. Reeves, best known for playing Superman in the 1950s television series, passed away on June 16, 1959, from a gunshot wound, with the official ruling being self-inflicted. He had maintained an ongoing relationship with Toni Mannix, Eddie's second wife, since 1951, and the arrangement was reportedly known to Eddie, who by most accounts accepted it without apparent objection. When Reeves began distancing himself from Toni in the late 1950s to pursue a relationship with someone else, her response was, by various accounts, not graceful. The complications surrounding the official ruling have never fully resolved. The autopsy proceeded after the scene had already been cleaned, with no residue testing conducted, and a wound pattern that certain investigators found inconsistent with the official account. Two guests were present in the house when Reeves passed away, and their accounts of the sequence of events shifted in the retelling. What actually happened on June 16, 1959 remains unknown, and it may stay that way permanently. What the case also illustrated was something specific about Mannix's circumstances by that point. By 1959, he had survived multiple heart attacks and relied on a wheelchair for stretches of time, which makes the theory that he was running active operations through organized crime contacts a considerable stretch. The theory persists in popular culture regardless, partly because it makes for a better story, and partly because the gaps in the official account genuinely invite speculation. Adrian Brody played a private investigator chasing exactly that theory in the 2006 film Hollywoodland, with Ben Affleck as Reeves and Bob Hoskins as Mannix. The film carried a production budget of $28 million and earned back $16.8 million worldwide on its nominal theatrical run, which left the studio staring at a serious shortfall before home video revenue entered the picture. Affleck won the Volpe Cup at Venice for his performance, which the CinemaScore numbers suggest general audiences never quite found their way to appreciating. Warner Brothers threatened legal action over the film's original title, Truth, Justice, and the American Way, on the grounds that they were releasing Superman Returns the same summer and did not want Superman's motto attached to a story about how Superman's original actor may not have taken his own life. That is a sentence containing more layers than most films manage across 2 full hours. Joel and Ethan Coen took a considerably lighter swing at the Mannix story in 2016 with Hail Caesar, with Josh Brolin playing an MGM-style fixer clearly modeled on Mannix, and a supporting cast including George Clooney, Scarlett Johansson, Ralph Fiennes, and Channing Tatum. The production carried a $22 million budget, excluding marketing costs, and earned $63.2 million worldwide on a nominal basis, landing at 86% on Rotten Tomatoes, while audiences awarded it a C- on CinemaScore. That gap between critical enthusiasm and audience indifference tells you most of what you need to know about the distance between what critics and general viewers want from a screwball Hollywood satire set in the 1950s. Mannix passed away on August 30th, 1963, and is buried at Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City, a few miles from the studio he had managed for nearly 4 decades. His entire professional operation rested on the absence of evidence, no records, no paper trail, no testimony that could hold in court, no documentation of the work that actually defined his career. Except one thing: the Eddie Mannix Ledger, a meticulous financial record of every MGM production across his tenure, now rests at the Margaret Herrick Library at the Fairbanks Center for Motion Picture Study, maintained by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Film economists consult it constantly because it functions as the primary source document for understanding the true financial performance of Hollywood's golden age, separate from the massaged figure studios released publicly. It is accurate, detailed, and sits at the center of serious scholarship on an era that the studios themselves worked hard to obscure. The man who spent his career ensuring nothing got documented left behind the definitive document. Biographer E.J. Fleming in The Fixers from McFarland Books, the primary biography of Mannix and Strickling, described him as the supreme orchestrator of cover-ups, the smooth operator who could make the impossible happen. Fleming is not wrong, but the ledger in that library is the other half of the sentence. Mannix could make the impossible happen, and he simply could not stop himself keeping the receipts. A sign reportedly sat on his desk throughout his tenure at MGM, reading, "The only star at MGM is Leo the Lion." The roaring lion in the studio's opening title sequence, not Gable, not Garland, not Crawford. The institution, the machine. That sign explains his entire operating philosophy in 11 words, because the stars were assets and the machine was the point, and his job was to protect the machine at any cost, which he did with a consistency that is genuinely difficult to square with any simple moral reading. Patricia Douglas stays with me more than anyone else in this story. She was 20 years old in 1937, and she tried to use the legal system, and the legal system turned out not to be available to her because the studio had already replaced it with its own version. She lived into her 80s. She never got what she was looking for. And the man who made sure of that is remembered in the same breath as a colorful Hollywood figure and as the keeper of the most useful financial document in film history. That is not a resolution. It is just what happened. The pattern where the fixer gets remembered as an institution and the people the system was used against become footnotes, if they get remembered at all, runs through Hollywood history in ways that most accounts stop well short of following. That is the territory this channel covers, and there is a lot more of it still to go.